In January, Forbes outlined the 15 key marketing trends to watch for in 2024. The number one trend, of course, was unpredictability. With this being an election year and a heated one at that, Forbes comments that the only trend they can confidently predict is unpredictability. So, what should you do as a marketer in the midst of all the political ads? How should your go-to-market strategy change? Marketing and sales are full of myths, misconceptions, and sometimes a ridiculous onslaught of political advertising. Join us as we leave the echo chamber and talk about unpredictability in 2024.
Hello and welcome to the Rethink Marketing Podcast, where we try to unpack the good and bad in today's marketing wisdom. I'm Paul Froese, joined by Mr. Marketing, and for today's conversation, the masterful maverick of marketing mayhem, Colin Jeffries. Colin, what's going on?
Hey, Paul, I feel great. How are you today?
Doing well. Looking forward to this timely topic.
Yes, absolutely. Paul, it feels like we have these different time increments where every year the Super Bowl drives up advertising cost. We see the FIFA World Cup periodically driving up advertising costs. We see presidential elections every 4 years, the Olympics every 2 years driving up advertising costs. So this will be an interesting conversation because it's focused on politics. And the fun thing about political advertising is that if I'm a candidate and I have a $20 million budget, just to pull a number out of the air, allocated, I have to spend all that money before the election. So there's a constrained period of time to actually get those dollars into attention.
Absolutely. So, what are we rethinking today? Looking at unpredictability in marketing, that's always been a topic of conversation. There's never that silver bullet, there's not an exact science. But what do you do during the heated debates of politics and, with the midterms just behind us and looking for, the November election? What is the right thing for marketers to do? And oftentimes it's difficult to decide whether I should be as a brand in the middle of all this or stay clear away from it. So, love to hear your opinion as we get started here.
Well, it's really interesting. We've seen brands like Nike, for example, really come out of political posturing in a very positive way. And we've seen brands like Bud Light come out of political posturing in really negative ways. We've also seen brands like I think about Starbucks, for example, and there have been situations where they've oscillated from one side of the aisle to the other side and back again and back again. And so what do we do as marketing leaders? There's the old adage, I don't care where my what is it? I don't care who my plumber votes for or something of that nature, right? Where like I want a guy who can come in and fix my pipes and make sure that my house isn't leaking. And I don't care who he votes for or who he donates to politically. I just want to make sure that I'm focused on my house and my home. So I think as brands, when we think about, there's a lot of unpredictability right now. We know that if a brand comes out and they support something that's very left leaning, they'll get roughly 40% support for it. If they come out and they support something right leaning, they'll get roughly 40% support for it. If they come out in the middle, they'll just get lambasted from both sides. So there's really no, to your point, there's really no easy or clean way to come out and say, we are standing for this and we're standing against that. Even coming out and saying this brand is pro-America or this brand is pro-economic growth or this brand is pro fill in the blank, things that used to be a little bit more centrist. Now we're really not even seeing common ground in those areas. So I think it's pretty dicey. My recommendation for most brands is carve out a niche, look for a position that regardless of the political climate is defensible. Because I think one of the big challenges that we've seen, Paul, is for organizations that are massive global brands. You think about Starbucks, you think about Nike, you think about Bud Light, they have to look at political posturing and they have to look at some flag raising and they have to look at some flag planting to say, hey, here is what we're standing for. And we're trying to attract a different audience or expand market share in some way. If you look at most brands, sub-billion-dollar brands, they don't necessarily have to do that to be relevant, to have some cultural engagement. They just have to come out and grow themselves, grow their category, etc., regardless of politics. Curious to hear your take on that.
I would argue what you said, Colin, in regards to, and I know you mentioned years ago it was like that. I don't care who my plumber voted for or what the ad looked like. He's here to fix my pipes. I'd like to expand on that a little bit more because I would argue that there's a lot of people out there that do care. I just met with a client last week and they said, "Hey, that spot that we ran last year, we need to make sure to take that American flag out of it during this time." And it was interesting to hear their take on that because they did not want to take a certain stance. They just wanted to sell their product. So it was interesting how we had to snipe that out of the commercial for this year and change it. So I think it depends on the client that you're talking to and the way that they want to go to market. And looking at this year, I think it's more heated than ever when it comes to politics. And as we get closer and closer to November, interesting to see how both traditional and digital marketing and how clients are going to go to market. Obviously, we have our own opinion as an agency and our recommendations as we move forward. But a lot of clients do not want to be in the pod with all of the TV advertising. They want to look at alternatives, OTT or connected TV. But even those are getting saturated now with political ads and the opportunity where are we going to pivot next? You mentioned earlier before this episode of looking at YouTube. I'd like to hear your opinion on even on the digital side, it's getting saturated. And what do marketers do next?
Absolutely. YouTube's kind of interesting because you can do behavioral targeting. So people who watch videos with these topics, these categories, those sorts of things, you can target them. This is a sophisticated audience of marketers. I'm not telling them anything that they don't know, but I say that for context because it becomes much easier as a political candidate to say, hey, I'm very far right. I'm going to target people who are looking at, very stereotypical right wing things, gun videos and constitutional education and those sorts of things. Or I'm a political candidate on the left. I'm going to target people who are looking at traditionally very leftist type of videos, right? And so that's kind of nice because there's segmentation there. Where we run into issues is watching X Games videos or Red Bull videos or humans are awesome videos or what have you. Is that left? Is that right? No, that's kind of anywhere. Anybody can enjoy that type of entertainment. And we're seeing a lot of that type of content now be, I'll say, oversaturated because I certainly think it's oversaturated with political advertising. And I think that's smart from a politician's perspective because, hey, anybody who's watching a skateboard video or a squirrel video or a fill in the blank, right, feasibly, who's over 18 could go vote. So it is important to get that name recognition to tell your story. But brands are being lost in that because there's just this cacophony of political advertising that feels desperate to get attention. And oftentimes, and I hate to say this because I know a lot of politicians work with good agencies, but political advertising typically is some of the worst advertising that we'll see. It doesn't do a good job telling a story. It doesn't do a great job connecting emotionally. It doesn't do a great job of resonating and of being relevant and of feeling really good from an advertising perspective and from a media perspective. So what that leads to is people start just wholesale tuning out advertising. And when we are vying for attention, somebody said, it was a marketer at Reddit. I forget what his name was, but he said human attention is more precious than gold, right? And when you think about, hey, we're paying dollars to get human attention here, what we have to do is recognize maybe as a brand or as an agency, the recommendation is let's stop spending until after election day, call it mid-November, and then we'll ratchet everything back up and we'll really have a good Q4, November, halfway through November through the end of the year. That's where we're going to consolidate and compact our Q4 performance, but we're not going to do it in, September, October, and then early November. Paul, what do you think?
That's a great point. But where do you turn? You don't want to just shut the advertising and marketing off. And what you're talking about in the sea of all the political, I liken it to every October leading up to election, especially if it's a big election year. All of the area high schools that have their yard signs out, and it's just getting missed because of all of the political signs that are in people's yards, right? So open houses for high schools, it's like advertisers on TV. You're just getting lost is the way that I look at it. So the alternatives to get in front of people, to get in front of potential customers, needs to change a little bit. A lot of people don't want to be in that sea of a million political ads that are all negative. So where do you turn? I say you don't shut it off. You look at alternative ways of getting in front of your potential customers.
And I think alternative is key here, Paul. We interviewed Alan Dibb on the podcast a couple of years ago, and he mentioned that he was running Facebook ads and he turned off his Facebook ads and drew up a list of his target customers. And then he sent each of them a copy of his book in the mail. That's a great way. And I realize not all of us have books that we can send that will develop new clients. I'm just using this as an illustration to say that that's a really good way to cut through the noise, because everyone's mailboxes are chock full of postcards. Vote for this person. Don't vote for that person. Here's the Democrat candidate list. Here's the Republican candidate list, right? Just so full of those. But what they're not full of is a package that feels robust, that has a book in it, that gets attention every time. So when we're looking at full mailboxes, email and traditional mailboxes, when we're looking at full TV feeds and full streaming feeds, just chock full of political advertising, saying, hey, we have to be unpredictable. We're talking about unpredictability this episode. We have to be unpredictable as marketers, and we can test a lot of different things. There was a government survey that they were doing for fathers in Ohio, and they went the traditional route. They sent out direct mail, and they printed on the outside of the envelope, there's a $10 bill inside of this envelope. And when you open it up, sure enough, there was a $10 bill in there. And they said basically like, hey, we're prepaying you to take this survey. It's $10. It'll take you 15 minutes, something like that. But that got attention because they were being unpredictable. It's not every day. I think maybe once in my life, I've gotten an envelope that said there's a $10 bill inside. And when I opened it up, there was a $10 bill inside. It's unpredictable. Those are the things that we as marketers can think of to really break through the clutter of standard postcards, 30-second and 15-second and 10-second spots that are just vote for this candidate because they're great, or don't vote for this candidate because they're terrible.
It's interesting you talk about the move of, for instance, television to after the election, mid-November or whatever. And from my experience in TV advertising, during these big political years, the inventory is going to be far and few between. Everybody is looking at, Lord, let's wait till after the election. So that unpredictability, I believe, is predictable, that the inventory is going to be tight in TV advertising, for instance, and to continue to look at alternative ways to get your message out even after the election is over.
Absolutely. We've seen recently that now that the weather's a little bit warmer, Paul, a lot of brands that are selling direct to consumer are having success going door to door. Now, that's not right for every brand, and it's certainly not appreciated in every neighborhood. And please don't do it during dinner time. But there has been a lot of success with those organizations because they're creating person to person contact. And that's something that's pretty rare these days. And it's much easier to ignore a spam call or ignore a robo email than it is to ignore somebody at your front door. So that's something that can be done too that's a little bit unexpected and maybe unpredictable.
That's a great point. We have a lot of home improvement companies and HVAC and roofing. And when they're doing a job in a certain neighborhood, they will take half an hour to an hour and just go the traditional route of the door hangers. Or in your neighborhood, and they see the trucks in there and they see the great job that they're doing on their neighbor's home. So definitely could be an opportunity for certain businesses.
Well, door hanger is a great example, right? It's basically the same printing cost as doing a postcard. And then you have somebody who's already in the neighborhood that can go put those out. And you know how many ads I usually see on a doorknob? Between 0 and 1. But when you open the mailbox, again, especially during a political year, when you turn on the TV, when you go to YouTube or you open your social feed, it's just an inundation of political ads. So I think that's a great point, Paul. A lot of opportunity to be unpredictable and to really stand out. And I'll just say too, this isn't new. Even when we're talking about OTT and pre-roll and TV advertising, heck, even newspaper advertising or direct mail, we really want to grab attention and be unpredictable. I remember back when individualization and personalization on direct mail first came out, everybody was jumping on board with that because you'd get countless slips that said "Dear neighbor," "resident," "homeowner," those sorts of things, right? And then here was one that was personalized. "Hey, Colin, here's something about your house that." They're obviously aggregating, but it's individualized and they're doing variable printing and it's something that's very personal. And so that was something that was unique and special until, again, everyone started to do it and then it's expected. So there's just a lot that we can do to stand out and to be unpredictable and to grab attention. But attention's hard to come by now. And people are looking for, they're more receptive to those outside the box ideas because we're ignoring at very high levels traditional channels. We're ignoring emails a lot more now because we're getting emails about political candidates. We're ignoring physical mail because we're getting so many mailers from political candidates. We're ignoring TV for the same reason, right? Like you can go through the list. And this is a really good opportunity, I think, for things like organizational podcasts. So, let's say that our target market is human resources leaders for businesses that are between 50 and 200 employees. Well, we can go get a list from LinkedIn of people that meet that description and then start reaching out to them to be on our podcast and to start building that network. We can have a YouTube channel or something of that nature where we're proactively inviting those people out. And then we're not asking for them to buy, we're just building pipeline. But that's a great way to build pipeline as well during a political year with high intent, highly valuable prospects. All right, Paul, I'm done sucking out all the oxygen in this room. I'll kick it back over to you.
All good. I would just end on, looking at unpredictability during this election year. Think outside the box. Think of alternative methods to maybe some former traditional types of marketing that have gone away so that you can catch that consumer's attention.
That's a great point. This could also be a good time for brands where applicable to take some of those advertising dollars and put them into SEO, put them into a website redevelopment, put them into creating some better assets like ebooks and whatnot that then can be deployed later when there's a little bit more attention availability in the attention economy. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on the Rethink Marketing podcast. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did, talking about unpredictability and the political season. It's one of the few political conversations that we came out of unscathed, I hope. Until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions and keep rethinking the allocation of your marketing budget during political season. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If people want to connect with us, where should they go, Paul?
RethinkMarketingPodcast.com, Colin. What can listeners do to help us in return for the sage marketing wisdom and our pithy humor?
They can help us by leaving a review on their favorite platform or sharing this episode with a fellow marketer to help them cut through the clutter.
Well, until next time, keep rethinking those common assumptions.